Hello my loves, I'm Ellie Frost. Thank you so much for being on my channel where we are talking about the multi-dimensional approach to rapidly and radically healing and transforming during and after narcissistic abuse. And I want to talk about understanding the spiritual attack of the narcissist, right? Because this is not a personality disorder. Right, I was an undergrad in psychology. I'm not saying I'm the most read, but I certainly studied a lot of mind-body textbook stuff. I qualified in a lot of healing modalities over my life. I studied peak performance. I trained people in it. I looked at the human mind and what motivates us, what triggers us, what heals us, and I qualified in a lot of different things. But beyond that, I went through cycles of narcissistic abuse. And what's fascinating to me is that, I did grow up with narcissists, but I didn't know what narcissism was. I had a very successful career after that. And then I moved countries and I went through more cycles of narcissistic abuse. And it wasn't like a straight line. It wasn't like I went from abuser to abuser. It was actually kind of the opposite. I thought I'd healed from it, but I never ever knew what it was. I created a completely different life, and then I went right back under in the grips of it in a way I didn't expect, right? One thing to know about narcissistic abuse is that it completely combusts your system. Because a narcissist is a soul-detached entity operating with an entity of consciousness that we're calling narcissism, that actually is working very much in multi-dimensional realms, in the psychic, telepathic, energetic realms. It's not really operating that much in the what we call the 3D, which is the three-dimensional physical realm, right? Which is why they appear to you in dreams. They can, I mean, goodness me, psychic attack, they can affect your electronics, they can affect the energy field, they can affect your thoughts, they can affect you, they can literally create the emotional response they want in you. They're operating telepathically, psychically, and in the spiritual realm, in the 5D realm, what we call the 5D, the fifth dimensional realm, right? A lot more than the 3D, which we all can as well, and we all are to a large extent. We're just not as aware of it, a lot of us, right? So the attack is spiritual. So many people I've met we'll talk about narcissists coming in dream states, narcissists affecting technology, narcissists knowing things, like when they've healed, they know the time they've healed to come back in. They have what seems like a sixth sense. It's not a sixth sense, it's just that they operate in the 5D more than the 3D. And part of what I teach people is how to operate in the 5D and the 3D, so that you're also aware of your spiritual gifts, your psychic gifts, your energetically aware and resilient, right? Because the best way to win a spiritual war is to be aware that you're in one, and to be resilient and know what you need to ignite and be aware of in your own spirituality that exists, right? You've got these abilities already to sense things. It's just that when it happens to us, we kind of romanticize it. It's like we think, oh, I had a dream about them, they must be my soulmate. No, it could mean you're under spiritual attack if it's a narcissist, right? So we have to know who's who in the universe. And that a lot of what the energy they send you is to affect the way you think and feel. So not all things you think and feel are yours. Sometimes we've got to be in our bodies and awareness enough to know what's mine and what's not. And that's something that we're not taught to do. So sometimes you might be having certain thoughts, right? Especially if they're obsessive or very compulsive. And a lot of the time they might not be even yours. They might be something that someone's sending you, right? So just like with prayer, right? If a lot of people say the same prayer, the reason prayer can be so effective when it's done in a collective is because, like, a group intention on one prayer that many people have put a lot of energy into, the same kind of intentions, has a lot of momentum, energy and power in the universe. So if a narcissist is sending you energetics, like energy, intention, that kind of thing, it has a certain momentum. And if it's operating from a kind of destructive consciousness, which is what narcissism is in the collective, then they're also like kind of working as a whole and as an individual, right? Which is what we do when we use common prayers or, you know, joint intention. So the way that we direct our energy individually and as a collective matters. So if you want to understand, like, how does it work spiritually, it works understanding that we're individual and a whole. And if whatever you kind of connect to collectively matters in it. It's not to be afraid though, because one person, like, very sovereign in their purpose, in their intentions and in their energetic field, can literally just be resilient to anything coming their way. So it doesn't really matter once you understand your sovereignty, like what's coming at you. It matters more how sovereign you are, right? By that, it means that if I'm aware of what's mine and what's not, and I don't consent and I don't allow anything that's not my own energy, my own field, my own thinking and feeling in my energetic field, then it has no impact on me, even if 100 people sent it, right? But if I'm not that sovereign, then I can easily get under the influence of whatever they're throwing at me, right? So it's what influence are we under? Is it our own sovereignty, our own divinity, or is it theirs? That's where it kind of like determines how much impact it's going to have on you. If you're very traumatized, right, then they're going to reignite that trauma. The hardest thing about being in trauma, and I know this from having PTSD and being like in a lot of trauma, was that I kept attracting more narcissists, like, or being very much preyed on by them, because it's like an open wound that they feed on, right? They know that this is the time they can be the most impactful. So we want to heal as fast as possible, because actually, like, although we would hope in the universe that if we were very traumatized, it would be the time we get help. It could be, and I hope it is for you, but it also makes, like, it's like an open wound to a vampire. If they're a narcissist, that it's the time they're going to strike. It's how they're going to get their inroad, because you in your right mind, not traumatized and with a very strong energetic field, is not going to fall for the trap of the narcissist, not as easily, right? So what I'd say about it is they're operating in multidimensional realms, which is why it's a multidimensional issue. This is not a personality disorder. This is a spiritual sickness. They're corrupt morally and spiritually. They've made a spiritual choice. They are a soul-detached human operating with an entity of consciousness we're calling narcissism, and they're operating against kind of like the rules of humanity. They're operating in ways to manipulate and kind of trick you in giving away your free will, right? They're not above God, but the thing is, when you consent to letting them in, right, when you let them in the door, when you let them in your energy, then you've consented, not intentionally, to everything that comes with. And that's where the imbalance is, because free will doesn't mean it's fair. It just means it's free will, so that we've got a universe here, right? It operates on universal laws and spiritual laws, right? And if we don't see who's who, and we don't know, like, what everything means, then we can assume that everyone's the same, or that we'd be spiritually protected when we actually are giving away our spiritual protection. So I talk a lot about karma, and how if you are enmeshed with a narcissist, they actually, it's your protection that they get enmeshed with, because they enmesh with your energy field, right? So it's kind of like it balances out. So your spiritual protection combined with their karma kind of balances out. They will get the karma for the people they've hurt before, but it depends on what the balance is. So when you completely detach, then they get their karma for you, right? But if they enmesh with someone else, they get a certain level of spiritual protection depending on how powerful a light worker that person is, right? It's all like a balance in the universe. So the thing to know is, one, there's a lot more going on than just someone being mean to you. You would never, if you think about it, so many people, myself included, there were so many times in my life where I'm not a typical victim of abuse. Like, I used to go around the world, I had my own business, I was highly successful, very independent. Like, it's not just the codependency. It's not just a personality disorder. There's a spiritual attack going on, which is, it's beyond those things. And once they've got you under, and it is a spell where you are completely enmeshed and you are being eroded at a very core self and soul level, that you are kind of just like cooperating with them and becoming what they need you to be rather than who you actually are, right? Because they're working energetically, they're working psychically, they're working in different realms. So a lot of people blame themselves and wonder how it happened, but if you can understand the spiritual context, it's very clear. And also, it's very easy to break when you actually know what you're dealing with. How do you win a spiritual war? You have to first of all know that that's what you're dealing with. And then you stop trying to solve it from such an intellectual, psychological level. Yes, there are wounds that we have, that they have. It's like the more childhood wounds you've got, the more vulnerabilities. They're easy access points, but they're not the reason. There are so many people on the planet who have been wounded as children, who are codependent, and they're not targeted by narcissists, right? And they haven't been, it's not a recipe for abuse. Most people are codependent on the planet. Very few are interdependent, which means I'm independent, you're independent, and together we connect and we have a joint vision that kind of boosts both of us. Most people are codependent, and that doesn't mean it's a recipe for abuse. So this overemphasis on what's wrong with us, rather than seeing the truth of actually you've got dark and light energies, right? And we've got a distorted imbalance right now where the darker energy it's got out of control because we're not recognizing it. We seem to have lost our own spiritual awareness, the ancient wisdom. This is written about for centuries and centuries and centuries. Somehow in our modern intellectualized world, we've forgotten what we've known forever, right? And when you go back to scripture, you go back to ancient wisdom, you go back to everything we've ever known, there is dark and light in the universe. And when you know what's what and who's who, it's easier to break. Yes, there's healing and evolution and growth and personal development and therapy and things that can help you be a better human being, right? A more authentic one, a more, the one that you want to be, the one that feels true to you. But narcissism isn't something just to be dealt with in the area of psychology. It's way more than that. And that's what we all know if we've been there, and also why it's so hard to break. But when you actually look at it from a historical, just a soul knowing level, then we come back to the truth, which is there's dark and light. It's everything that's ever been written about. It's, you're experiencing something. There's a bit like the Twilight Zone, and it's not a personality disorder. It's a spiritual issue that we can deal with on a spiritual level faster to resolve when you know what you're dealing with. When you know what you're dealing with, then your job is your self-actualization, your self-realization, your sovereignty. So if you want to join Sovereign, I'm opening the doors July 17th. That's what I wanted to share, guys. Lots of love. I'll speak to you soon.